Welcome to episode 64 of the Hoopsfix podcast with me, your host, Sam Nita, full-time British basketball advocate. And on this week's show, we have another former GB and England international, Chris Haslam. He is now a coach, an assistant coach at the NCAA Division 1 school, Montana State University in the US. So he gave us a great opportunity to not only talk about all the impressive things he did over his 13-year pro career, but also his experiences on the other side of the game, college athletics, recruiting, the difference between British prospects compared to prospects from other countries, and all that other good stuff. I must say that I was a little bit more advanced in my planning, so this was actually recorded a week ago, and a lot can change in a week. And we spent a lot of time talking about COVID, the coronavirus pandemic, how it's been affecting the British student athletes that are currently in the UK and were at the time stranded with the travel ban in place and embassies closed with no sign of them being able to get their visas to be able to return to the States. Since this has been recorded, a number of things have actually changed. Players, student athletes on visas are allowed to fly now despite the travel ban. US embassies are slowly starting to open up to allow incoming freshmen that don't have their visas to be able to get their F1 visas. So that is, even though it's interesting to talk about and you can kind of hear the issues that have been going on over the last few weeks, months for British student athletes that are in the UK, those rules and what was going on has actually changed and been updated. So it's just worth keeping that in mind as you're listening. Before we do get into the show, as always, got to give a quick mention to our Patreon account. We've had a few more Patreons sign up recently. If you go check out patreon.com/hoopsfix, that's patreon.com/HOOPSFIX. There you can sign up to give us a monthly contribution of as much or as little as you'd like to help us do the work that we're doing. It costs the price of a cup of coffee, even less or more than that. If you want to help support the work we're doing, we cannot do it without your support. So please go and check it out and consider reaching into your pocket and giving a little bit of money every single month to help us build this media empire that we are trying to build. As always, if you have any feedback, you can reach out to me on every single social media platform at Hoopsfix. You can drop me an email if you prefer private communication, sam@hoopsfix.com. If you're listening on iTunes, please take 2 seconds to give us a rating and review. I think we're about 78 ratings now. I would love to get us over the 80 mark, so please take 2 seconds to get your phone out your pocket, load up your podcast player and give us a 5-star rating and some feedback and a review that I'll read out on the show in the intro. And if you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let's get some discussion going. Anyway, that's enough from me. Here is this week's show with me and Chris Haslam. All right, take two. As we have just learnt that we've just started recording, we did 35 minutes and my laptop decided to freeze and we lost the file, so we're starting again. I'm very frustrated, but we're going to churn it on, keep on going, and I appreciate you sticking with me. So, all good. We're going to recap kind of what we started talking about to begin with, is just the COVID situation. Obviously, you're at Montana State at the moment. College athletics is in a bit of a situation. We've got a bunch of British student athletes here in the UK that are unable to get to the USA at the moment because of the travel ban and embassies being closed. Kind of, what is your take on COVID, the impact on British student athletes and I guess college athletics as a whole?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously right now, especially with, as you said, British players or, and all international student athletes, they're in a bind, obviously with the travel ban, the borders being closed, obviously to the UK and Schengen areas or Schengen countries. So it's up in the air, not knowing, for returning players, when the border will be open, will they be allowed to get back into the US before the new school year starts? And then I think it's going to most impact the incoming freshman class because of again with the travel ban, but obviously with their inability to get their student visas with the US embassies being closed worldwide. I know in the past couple of days, some have started to open up again. So hopefully that's a good sign for, the international student athletes that maybe the borders will open up to them. They'll be exempt from the travel ban, fingers crossed. But, you're just sitting and checking, daily what the situation is. and trying to stay positive that everything will work out to get these players back to campus.
And just to be clear, so for the freshmen, the reason it's impacting them more is because that F1 visa is once you get it, it's a 5-year student athlete visa, so you don't have to renew it. So with the embassies being closed, the freshmen can't actually get the visa in the first place, which means they won't be able to get to the States.
Exactly right. That's the issue. Now, obviously, with the NJCAA, the Junior College Athletic Association, obviously have moved 4 sports. Basketball. It's now going to start in January. Practice will start January the 11th. First games are January the 22nd. Maybe that will help the British lads, because I know obviously there's several that are going the junior college route. I know obviously there's the 3 Marisco lads that are going to Blinn, junior college in Texas, for example. But with that start date moved back, maybe that gives them time then to be able to get their F1 student visa, and go over at the Christmas break and start then, so they won't miss any games. We'll see. Division 2 or NCAA Division D2s are basically doing conference games only and starting again after Christmas. With Division 1, it's still up in the air. Nothing's changed. We're being told that, in November. But there is rumor that maybe it will, be pushed back into the spring semester and just be conference games only. So we've got to be fluid with how we go about things. But there is a way around it for returning, international student athletes coming back to campuses, in terms of quarantining for 2 weeks in a country that doesn't have the travel ban placed on it. As we were talking a little bit before, there's 2 Irish lads that have done 2 weeks in Croatia and are flying into the US this Sunday. So I'm waiting to hear how that goes for them. But it might come down to it if the borders don't truly open up. That would be the only option for British players to get in the country.
Do you have any inclination, like if you were to put money on what you see happening with Division 1, do you think the likelihood is it will do the same thing and move to the spring semester, January 2021, or do you think that actually November start date could be very possible?
To be honest, either is not going to surprise me. I could see it where they'll push it back to the spring semester, start after Christmas, just do conference games, have your conference tournament, and then off you go, hopefully have an NCAA tournament. But I'd like to think that by November, and maybe it's more doable with college basketball, Division 1 basketball, in terms of maybe playing in front of with no crowd. We'll see. Obviously, it's different than college football, but that wouldn't surprise me if we go ahead and start in November and then play behind closed doors.
When you're talking about the long-term impact, COVID could have on college athletics, especially, right now everyone's trying to see whether or not the football season's going to start. Obviously, the college football it's the biggest revenue generator for a lot of college athletics programs and subsidizes a lot of the other sports. When you talk about the impact that this is going to have long-term on college athletics, college basketball, what would you say about it, and what do you see end up happening?
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't a college football season, I mean, it can really have disastrous, consequences for a lot of athletic departments that rely so much on the revenue generated, from their football programs to run their athletic departments. I mean, there have been some conferences already that have moved the football season back to the January or spring semester. It's all if again, you have to play in front of empty stadiums. That's a huge hit. The bigger conferences should be able to, won't take quite as big of a hit because of the TV contracts that they have. But, for the kind of mid-level and down, not having fans in the stadiums and losing that game day revenue will really have a big negative effect. There's already been a lot of, non-revenue programs at various universities around the country that have already been dropped. I know, again, Stanford, was it last week, cut, I think, 11, maybe 10, 11, 12 sports teams to save money. So if there's no college football season, I could see a lot of that, or a lot of more of that happening.
Has your athletics director or whoever the person is responsible for the kind of budgets and stuff, have they kind of said to you, budgets are going to be cut this coming season, this is what we need to prepare for? Has that not happened yet?
No, there is. Our athletic director has said that, in our budget, each program's budget is getting cut. They haven't made a final decision how much, but kind of preparing for like a 10% cut, 15, 20, 30% cut, just be prepared. What does that look like? So, for us as our program and our staff, we've talked about that. If there is a 20% cut, 30% cut, where do we trim the fat off what we need to get done, this coming year for our program? So there's definitely going to be a budget cut. We just haven't been told by how much yet.
So then for your program, if there was a cut of 20, 30%, where do you think you'd be able to save that money? What do you think would end up, getting snipped?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for us, the biggest thing not to try and be affected is our recruiting budget. Obviously, recruiting is the lifeline of every program. And then, not being able to treat our guys in the right way, how we travel, on to road games, hotels, flights, meals, things of that sort, still to provide those at a first class level, but it's, to be honest, I think I don't know exactly where we'll cut things. We'll see. I mean, there is to maybe offset it. We've talked about maybe playing an extra, buy game or guarantee game, where, the bigger schools and bigger conferences will pay other teams to come in and play them. So maybe we'll play an extra game to offset that budget cut. So I think that would be a great way to do it. But again, things are just kind of up in the air. Right now, we're waiting to hear what the final decision is, and then we can go ahead and again, kind of change our budget and what it looks like.
And then finally, on the topic of COVID, the British players that are in the UK and potentially, let's just say, worst case scenario, they don't end up being able to get out to the States this season. Under current NCAA rules, of course, they're not allowed to play or represent another team. Have there been any conversations with the NCAA or that that you're aware of potentially making some amendments to the rules to allow players to continue to work on their game, play for a team here if they're not allowed to come back out for at least another year?
Right. I haven't heard anything concrete. But I have to imagine the NCAA would have some common sense and change that rule. Obviously with the circumstances, it's unfair, on players if they obviously can't get back into the States. You have to allow them to then play. Continue to. They can't go 10 months a year without playing. So I'd imagine there'd have to be some change in the rule, an exemption. But I haven't heard anything concrete from the NCAA as of yet.
Has there been any thoughts around potentially, let's just say that, so the end of last season was cancelled. Let's say the first half of this season or a large part of this coming season ends up being cancelled, which I don't think is going to happen, but if it did happen, when you're talking about players' development, do you think we could end up with a whole generation of players that lose a crucial year, not necessarily at the college level, maybe even younger, that are sort of coming through and miss out on a year of competition that really harms their development down the line?
Yeah, of course. At that, critical ages of, 12 to 16, absolutely. If you can't play, you can't practice, it's kind of just individual workouts, in a closed setting. Absolutely. It could hurt that generation, having that whole year not develop, not to play, practice. The one for us, if there's no season, with the NCAA, if worst case scenario, then what do you do with the seniors? Do they get an extra year? but then you've got your freshman incoming class that you've signed. You're only allowed so many scholarships. So how is that dynamic going to work? I mean, that would be a mess for the NCAA to figure out, sort out. So, who knows?
Crazy. All right, that's enough of COVID. I think it's all we see every day at the moment, so it's important to touch upon. But yeah, let's get into your career stuff. The early days, I always like to start at the beginning. Your first exposure to basketball and how you ended up first starting playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, like most kids, it was in my secondary school. I was actually kind of late. I was late to the game. I didn't really start playing till I was about 16 and a half. I liked all sports growing up, would participate in any sport. Obviously traditional sports, football, rugby, cricket were the big three that I played a lot. Thankfully, one of the PE teachers at the secondary school, was a basketball fan. He enjoyed playing. So, he kind of taught us the game after school. Obviously, it's 16 and a half when I started playing. I was already 6'8", 6'9". So that helped. My dad had played some basketball growing up. My dad's 6'10", 6'11". That's obviously where I get my height from. But, he talked about basketball. And obviously, as you know, back then on Channel 4, they played, late night NBA games. So I ended up watching those games with my dad and really liked the game. Obviously, it's, there was nothing like it in England, so and obviously being taught. Immediately fell in love with the game at the high school. Thankfully, again, my PE teacher, looking back, did a pretty good job coaching, fundamentals and how to play the game. And that gave me a great base and foundation. But like I said, immediately fell in love with it and went from there.
Do you think you had a natural affinity from it from the start?
I mean, I think so. I mean, obviously, bigs were later to develop how our body moves, but I was always reasonably coordinated, hand-eye coordination, run, move, things of that sort. The game did come reasonably naturally to me. And I get, obviously my height was a big help to begin with. But yeah, I think I took to it pretty easily.
And so you grew up in Southport. Can you talk about kind of like the basketball scene there and what you remember from when you first started playing?
Yeah, so I mean, my first real kind of competition. So from my secondary school, I ended up then going down to my local YMCA. We had a junior team and a men's team that played in, the local leagues in the Northwest. And again, got lucky, with the coaches that I had at the local, junior YMCA team. Again, really did a good job, coaching us. Really got a lot better in that kind of year that I played before I went to the States. The level of the junior basketball, in the Northwest was really good standard. So that was great. I did end up playing, on the men's team, and again had good competition and that base. To play at that level at a young age was really helpful.
So you ended up suiting up for Chester Jets under 23 side, and was that under both Joe Forbert and Mike Burton? Yeah.
So again, I was playing for the local YMCA team, and we finished playing a game, and I honestly can't remember. Some guy came up to me afterwards and was like, "Hey, would you Chester Jets local have a under 23s junior program, would love for you to come down and train and practice with it." So I was like, okay, that's fine. Went down there. Obviously it was Joe Forbert and Mike Burton, two British coaching legends, and obviously it was more Joe Forbert. Would go twice a week to train. It was about 40-minute drive from Southport to Chester. And again, it was great. Joe, I mean, again, developed me, took me to another level. Just working with him, obviously his discipline and knowledge of the game, it's what he does so well at that junior level. Good competition and played again at a higher level. and it was big in my development for sure. His influence, to this day.
Do you still talk to him? Are you still in touch with him?
A little bit. We have, obviously with kids, the Manchester program. When I go back home, if I'm around, pop in and see him. It's been a little bit the last couple of years, but we have been in contact for sure.
So when you talk about kind of your generation, the guys coming through as a junior that you saw up and down the country that you were like, yeah, like these guys are good. Who are the names that stick out that you remember? Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of talent at that. At that time at the junior level, a lot of really good talent. And the thing is, I starting late, and then obviously it was a short span from starting to play till I went to the States. I really wasn't around the junior level, on a kind of nationally. I didn't play any, England under 16, under 18, whatever it was. So I was a little limited, but it was kind of like word of mouth. And the three big names were Delmy Herriman, Steve Hansel, and Danny Craven. With Danny, I actually went to Manchester and played in some like open gym, got some run down there. First saw him, obviously he's 6'10", and he was amazing at that age. He was unbelievable. So far ahead of me, I wasn't even in the same ballpark. But it was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to get to. That's where I have to get to. And then Delmy and Steve, you hear a lot. Obviously, they were on the national level at an early age. Both went to the States as well. And it wasn't until I kind of came back after that year of high school in that summer that I was around those guys and got to play with them and meet them. And now obviously played with them on the national team and really good friends.
Obviously, not having represented the junior national team, you can't have had a lot of profile. So how did that move to the States for your senior year of high school come about?
So again, just very lucky, right place, right time. So when I was playing for my YMCA team in Southport, there was an American guy named Bruce Parkinson, and he played at Purdue in the late 70s, early 80s, and he actually got drafted back then. I think there was like 7-8 rounds. He got drafted in the later rounds. But through his work, his company, he ended up, of all places, living in Southport. And he was probably early 40s, and just was looking for a place to get some running. And so obviously he came down to the YMCA. We played. And then after about 2 months, he one day after practice was just, have you ever thought about going to the States? And that, obviously I had no clue about high school basketball, NCAA, college basketball, college sports in the States, anything. But he's the one that first put that thought into my head, explained everything, talked to my parents. And originally I was actually going to go live with him back in Indiana and go to the high school where his sons went to. But the Indiana high school rules, I don't know, transfers or whatever, it didn't work out. But then I talked to Joe Forber and Mike Burton about it. And they had a contact in Savannah, in Georgia, who through him, I got hooked up with the coach at the high school that I eventually went to, St. Andrews, got a host family. And really it was 9 months, 10 months since I started playing. Then I went to the States.
At that point, did you already know that you wanted to be a professional basketball player? Was you already aspiring to that, or was it very much just, I enjoy it and I'm just going to see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't think about playing pro then. I was still young. No thought of it. It was the excitement of, going to the States, playing at a higher level. Obviously, did my research, speaking to the Bruce who put that thought in my head about going to the States. Started to understand what a big deal it was. The game is, high school level, at college over here, and just thought, I've got to go try. My parents were super supportive, go do it, go try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you've got to go try. You can't have any regrets. So I went for it and it worked out.
How did you find that transition to American high school basketball from what you'd been used to in the UK?
Oh, it was night and day. And I went, I was at St. Andrews High School in Savannah, and it was a 2A or in a 2A classification. So in Georgia, the biggest classification is 4A. So I was kind of at a mid-level, kind of smaller high school, which looking back was great for me. If I'd have gone to a big 4A school, I'd have probably got lost in the mix a little bit. So the fact that I went to a smaller school really benefited me, I think, looking back. But, just the level of play of kids of that age was night and day compared to what I'd experienced, in the UK. Just the approach, the practice every day, the intensity, the competitiveness, the coaching, everything was just a much higher level.
And you won a state championship and were Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's right. And again, just very lucky on a talented team. Had some other good players on the team, really good high school coach. And we ended up winning the state title, which was an unbelievable achievement, the first one in school history. And I was fortunate enough that I got Player of the Year. So again, very lucky, just right place, right time. And it worked out well.
So at what point from when you first got to the States did the colleges come knocking, and kind of what are your memories of, the entire recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, it was eye-opening, obviously. And college coaches came in pretty quickly. And, I get it completely. It was a 6'11" kid that suddenly just appeared out of nowhere. So, a lot of coaches out of curiosity, started calling and coming, to practices to watch early on. And it was eye-opening. Obviously, again, even at that point early on, knew a little bit about college basketball, but not a lot. Was learning on the fly, but coaches, and it was. Again, it was pretty fun, to be wanted to get that attention at that early age. That's what it was about. Leaving home, doing a year of high school to eventually move on and play at the Division I level.
So who were the schools that were recruiting you, and kind of where did you go on visits to? How was your selection process being worked out in your head?
Right. So, early on, I had, some local, it was Georgia Southern, obviously being in Georgia. I actually had Florida and Florida State come in. But the biggest one early on was Vanderbilt, who came in. I went on a visit early, and they actually wanted me to sign early. I took my visit to, in Nashville, Tennessee, unbelievable facility, unbelievable campus. Mind blown. I'd never seen anything like that, obviously, at home. They wanted me to sign early, and I didn't want to, because obviously I'd only been in the States a couple of months and just wanted to, we hadn't even played a game at that point. It was just practice and workouts. So wanted to kind of play the season, talk to some other schools, see some other places, take some other visits. So I wasn't ready or felt comfortable to make that decision early. Unfortunately, at the end of that season, the head coach took another job, and the new coaching staff that came in had their own bigs that they were recruiting. And the head coach at Vanderbilt, at his new program, didn't need a big. So that opportunity kind of went. I did take a visit to Florida State, which was, again, unbelievable experience. They had a really good team. Pat Kennedy was the head coach, but they had Sam Cassell, Bobby Sora, two really good NBA players. They were ranked top 20 in the country, and I went, watched them practice, and it was unbelievable. Again, that was eye-opening, the standard of play, how big, how athletic, how skilled they were. But kind of came away at that time thinking, I'm not ready for it. It's too high a level. Obviously, the ACC. And it was the right decision. I wasn't that good enough to play at that level. Might have been a bench role player, but obviously didn't want that. I wanted to have the opportunity to play right away my first year and have that true, 4-year career and be developed and, to play. But that was interesting. That was my first college football game I went to, 75,000 people in the stands. Again, never seen anything like it. And that was like, welcome to U.S. college athletics. This is big business. It's serious. And again, eye-opening. So, it was a great experience.
So you ended up going to Wyoming. What tipped the edge there? What made you decide to choose Wyoming?
Yeah, well, it was, obviously signed in the April signing period with Wyoming. And it kind of came down to them and Virginia Tech. I had obviously some other schools in the mix, but it was really between those two schools. And really, to be honest, I would have gone to Virginia Tech. Had a great visit, really liked the coaching staff. But they had found out about me late. And so they'd already signed 2 players in the early signing period, so didn't have a scholarship left, and wanted me to go to a prep school in that area with the view of signing, that year after. But I didn't really want to go the prep school route, and really, in particularly, because it was a military prep school that they wanted me to go to. So, yeah, with everything, what was involved with that, I was like, no, I don't want to get up at 6 a.m. and march and all this stuff. So, but Wyoming did a great job recruiting me. My head coach, Jubrile, was actually from Savannah. So he was actually at Miami of Ohio and then got the job he coached Wally Zerbiak. Went to the NCAA tournament with Miami of Ohio, got the Wyoming job and knew about me because he's from Savannah and his circle of friends or whatever. So they recruited me, went out on a visit, really enjoyed my visit there. Actually went out on a visit with H.L. Coleman, who obviously played in the BBL for many years, really good player, and Pat Kelsey, who's now the head coach at Winthrop University. And we clicked right away. I really liked Coach Wright because he was a big man. He played at Indiana, was an assistant under Bobby Knight at Indiana for 10 years. And his thing was coaching bigs, and he wanted to play through his bigs. So I really liked that idea to be, developed by a true big man. And then the league, back then it was the WAC, it's the Mountain West today, but it was a really good league. Utah, BYU, San Diego State, UTEP, New Mexico, Colorado State, Hawaii, really good league. But I thought it was a league that, again, I could play in, that I'd have the opportunity to play that first year. And then, as I got to upperclassmen, be a main rotation guy or a starter.
That whole recruiting process, obviously now you're heavily involved in the recruitment side of things, and I always say I've got a lot of love for you because I know that you keep an eye out on all the British players and ensure that you're giving them an option to potentially come to Montana State. How did your own recruitment process sort of impact how you recruit now? And I guess what is your approach to recruiting players? What are you thinking about when you're trying to sort of recruit a player to Montana State?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and obviously it was a long time ago getting recruited, but, everyone's different approach to recruiting. Each program, each coaching staff is different. Some are very aggressive. Some programs, throw out a ton of offers, to practically every kid. Some do a great job and are very open, transparent, honest. And then, you have the coaches, the programs that, again, kind of that American fast talking used car salesman pitch, and it was interesting to see everyone's different approach, and even that today. And, for us as a staff here at Montana State, we don't throw out a lot of offers. We take the approach, again, open, honest, transparent. This is us. This is what we have. We have a great situation here on and off the court. And I want to recruit kids who want to be at Montana State, who have that genuine interest in us. I don't, if I'm recruiting a kid or calling or texting or whatever, and I've got to keep chasing them, then, that's just wasted effort and energy when I can recruit a talented kid, when I call, takes the call or calls me back or texts me back right away, it's that two-way, stream. That's what I look for, really excites me about a kid. Obviously it has to be talented, competitive, all those other things, but, to recruit kids that, want to be here. It's not like, oh, Montana State, but I've got the eye on a bigger prize. I'm not going to chase a kid like that.
How would you say that British players might differ to American players when you talk about recruiting? Do you think that, maybe they have less entitlement or expectation because they're from the UK, so they're not kind of in that world as much?
Yeah.
What I'd be interested to hear the differences.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, yes. Absolutely. The excitement. Obviously, it's exciting to be recruited. The British lads. That entitlement isn't quite there, like it can be here in the States. It's my experiences with English lads has been great. Now, obviously, there have been, some lads that again, Montana State, oh no, they want to go to Florida State, but not understanding the levels, and that's the biggest thing. I think it's definitely improved over, the 7 years I've been at the Division I level in terms of coaches and kids understanding, more educated about college basketball and, the different levels, different leagues, everything that's, what it takes to be at the Division I level, what it entails. Because my first few years there were kids, who had got terrible advice, haven't got a clue, parents don't know, and that's fine. I was in that situation too when I went. My parents didn't have a clue. I didn't really know, but it definitely has got better. Obviously there are a ton of coaches who I'm friends with, keep in contact with, who do a great job giving kids advice. But for the most part, recruiting English kids is very refreshing because of that lack of entitlement and genuine excitement to be recruited, excitement to take that next step, get to that next level and get over to the States.
How much of an advantage do you think that the British connection is? Do you think that, players said to you the fact that you're English, makes them more likely to want to come to Montana State because you've got that kind of common ground?
Yeah, a little bit. It definitely helps. I mean, now I'm older and, I think it definitely helps. It's definitely with parents as well. That I'm British, I do take it a bit more personally, with the British kids that come over and obviously, not just to recruit to Montana State, but to help British kids. I had help when I came over. And again, you've heard the horror stories of, there's how many British kids are really talented that have had bad advice or got to the States and been put in the, or got to the wrong situation where it's not what they thought, it's the wrong level. It's just not that they can't have success and they end up back in the UK in a worse situation. And just to avoid that with, as many British lads, because there is a lot of talent. There's so much talent in England. And, whether it's Division I, D2, like I said, JUCO, NAIA, prep school, just helping these kids get to a situation over here where they can have success and move on and have a great college experience, American experience, and hopefully further down the road, it sets them up to potentially have a pro career.
Yeah. So jumping back to your college career, so you're at Wyoming for 4 years. One of the things I've seen you say is that you felt you underachieved in terms of the talent that you had on the roster. Do you still look at it like that? Kind of what are your recollections of how you and your squad sort of performed over your time there?
Yes, I mean, looking back, still think we underachieved. We had a lot of talent. We always finished a couple of games above 500. Mid-table in the conference. Never really made a big run in the conference tournament either in my 4 years. But we had a lot of talent, but just didn't quite get over the hump. Maybe a little bit unlucky, just for various reasons. Never achieved what on paper we should have with the talent that we had. I played my first 2 years with Theo Ratliff, who, NBA lottery pick, NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Unbelievable player, unbelievable athlete. But again, in his 2 years, again, just we were good, just okay, but again, didn't achieve what we should have. Looking back,
how hard was it playing against someone like Theo Ratliff for 2 years at practice?
So my first year was like a nightmare, absolute nightmare. Like literally, I couldn't get a shot off like the first 2 months of practice. He was 6'10", long. To this day, one of the most athletic players I've been around. And it was his second jump. You could get him on a shot fake or get him off his feet, but he'd be back on the floor, back to the top of the square in an instant. And it was just that first year as a fresh-faced freshman. Practice was a living hell. thankfully, my second year, I started. So he was at the 4 and I was at the 5. So basically, in practice, we were on the same team. So it wasn't quite as bad when we, scrimmage and play and practice. So it was a lot easier after that. But I mean, he's, like I said, his work ethic, he deserved everything that he got. He was humble and worked so hard, and you could tell he was, going to have a long, illustrious NBA career, which is what he did.
How much do you think that impacted on your own sort of personal development and getting better?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, for 2 years, I had to put in the work and develop and get better. Like I said, after that first year, it was like, I can't have another year like that. It was really difficult playing against him in practice, drills, etc. I had to get better. There was no way around it. I had to develop and learn a way to play against. I was never, everyone would say I wasn't the most athletic, big, so I had to, develop moves back to the basket, be crafty, footwork, using my body, things of that sort to be able to get shots off, over those long, athletic, big guys.
Yeah, I was going to say that I spoke to Tony G quickly before chatting with you, and one of the things he said was that he felt like your game was ahead of its time in many ways because you were able to stretch the floor. But then also, you've sort of got the post moves. When you talk about your own development, and I guess the progression that you've seen of the big man over the period of time from then until now, what would you say about it, and how would you kind of, I guess, sort of assess your own take on your own development?
Yeah, I mean, I was always, a true 5-man back to the basket, especially in college. Back then the game was different, slower paced, more physical. Excuse me. Playing through the low post, and so, I really wasn't allowed out on the floor on the 3-point line. It was all inside. Maybe take an elbow jump shot if I was lucky. If I didn't make it, I'd hear about it. Things of that sort. But it was be big, be physical. Control the paint, play down low, things of that sort. Really, the first big guy in my time actually was Keith Van Horn in our league at Utah, the Utah team. I mean, he was the one where he, get the rebound and he'd become a point forward, and seeing his skill set was eye-opening as well. I mean, he was a really good player, obviously, but for me in college, it was stay inside. Now, it wasn't until my first time with the England national team playing for Laszlo Nemeth. It was the summer I'd got done at Wyoming, and I was in training camp we were in Hungary, and I would be out on the perimeter, whether to ball reverse or whatever, and I'd be open, and I wasn't even looking to shoot because obviously programmed from college, it was okay, reverse the ball, screen roll, or just go post up, play inside. And Laszlo, was like, if you're not going to shoot it, I'm not going to play you. If you're open, you can shoot it. I want you to shoot it. You got the green light. If it's a good shot, shoot the ball. And that was, and he was persistent in that. And I got, because I could always shoot. I always had pretty good touch, but again, it wasn't the done thing in college. But that was that different mentality to that European or international game. Bigs have got to shoot, got to be able to stretch the floor. And he gave me great confidence to go ahead and shoot the ball. And that became, it did become a big part of my game.
Do you think your game would have been more suited to today's game? Do you think you'd been able to have a even more successful career with the style of play from today compared to then?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. With its, space and pace and the three-point shot being so prevalent, the analytics, in college, in the NBA. I think absolutely, because I did become a pretty good three-point shooter as my pro career developed. Obviously I still, was physical down low and my bread and butter was in the low post, things of that sort. But, a different dimension as a big that could be on the 3-point line and create spacing and shoot the ball. Absolutely. I think today's style of play would have suited my game more.
You kind of become recognised as a sort of a specialist big man development coach. You've obviously got a British big at the moment, Jubrile Belo. When you get a a big coming to you that you're going to be working with, what are the first things that you look at, that you kind of, the fundamentals that you want to make sure that they have in their sort of bag of tricks or whatever, or that they have fundamentally down, to be able to sort of push them forward and develop them?
Right. I mean, it's really, I try to keep things simple. It's the biggest thing is instilling in bigs to want contact, to love contact. Again, in today's game, there's no real true bigs anymore. It's a bit of a lost art. Bigs are wanting to be skilled and be perimeter players, and it's like, no, your bread and butter down low, have that fundamental base of playing with your back to the basket. And it's really, footwork balance, initial post position, playing low, but creating contact. And it's okay to be physical and use your body. Jubrile obviously had a heck of a year for us this past year. He was newcomer of the year in our league, third team or conference. And his development, he just got better and better as the year went on. But he's embraced being a true big. Now he can stretch the floor and he can shoot it and he can face up, some, and developing that side of his game. But having that fundamental base of being a true big, being comfortable with your back to the basket on the low block, okay, being able to turn and face up down there. And it's a move and a counter move. That's it. Move and a counter move. You don't need to be Hakeem Olajuwon or Kevin McHale and, have a counter to the counter to the counter move. That can come down the road, but work balance and positioning to make things simple down there for you.
Why do you think that we haven't seen more bigs use the sky hook?
But because everyone wants to shoot the basketball, that's it. It's a lost art of development down there. And it's, still to this day, the most unstoppable shot if you have the right footwork, again, base and balance to get a jump hook off. It's unstoppable. But it's just, again, bigs in today's game are, screener, rollers, finisher just around the rim, dump off passes, offensive rebound, putbacks. There aren't too many bigs where, even in the NBA, where you're just feeding the ball in time and again, playing with your back to the basket, So I think the style of play, lends itself where, again, bigs, you're not really throwing the ball inside as much, unfortunately.
Yeah. So jumping back to your college career, there was, the highlight, the big win was against Utah. Stack's nationally ranked squad with 3 future NBA pros. Can you go through your memories of that game in particular?
Yeah, it would be, as you said, probably the biggest college win of my career. Utah ranked 4th, 3rd in the country. It was on ESPN Big Monday game, the late game on the Big Monday. I think we had 12, 13,000, fans, basically packed arena. Utah were really good that year. Keith Van Horn, Michael Doliak, Andre Miller, 3 players who had unbelievable NBA careers. And obviously Rick Majerus, who, one of the best college coaches ever, really tough. And, I just remember we were down at halftime, probably about 10 points, something like that. In the second half, it started to get away from us a little bit. And I think it was about 7, 8 minutes to go. We're down 12, 13, 14 a little bit. And, we hit a couple of shots, crowd got into it, we got rolling, and they missed, and we had the momentum, and we ended up, winning, pulling out and winning. And one of those moments, the crowd rushed the court, everyone's jumping around, TV cameras are there. It's just an unbelievable experience.
You did all 4 years at Wyoming. Now, do you feel like there is much? I don't actually know the figures, but it feels like a lot more players transfer now. There's very few, especially when I'm talking about British players. It always surprises me when there's a player that stays at a Division 1 school for the entire 4 years, and when they graduate, I'm like, wow, they actually did that for the entire 4 years. Do you think that's something that's changed over the years in terms of mentality? Why do you think and if you do, why do you think there has been an increase in transfers? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely changed the mentality. My 4 years, it was uncommon that you transfer. You stuck it out, you played all 4 years, and that's what it was. Whereas now you look at the transfer list the last 6-7 years for Division One. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're talking every year the numbers are higher and higher. I think this year was it 800 kids transferred out of Division One programs. And I think it's just going to increase when the NCAA puts in the new transfer rule that will come into effect next year, where you get the one-time waiver, so you can transfer from D1 to D1 without having to sit out across the board.
And that comes in next season?
They were talking about bringing it in this year, but it got voted down, but it's going to come in next year. And that's going to, it's already craziness with the transfers now. It will go off the charts next year when you don't have to sit out. Now, at present, that you can get some waivers where you don't have to sit out when you transfer D1 to D1 if there's a coaching change, and the new coaching staff comes in, you don't know them, you'll transfer to another school, you'll get a waiver where you don't have to sit out. That's been in the last few years. But again, this one-time transfer rule that will come in next year is going to be like the wild, wild west. And really how it will affect, especially, at the mid-major level like us and down, the high major schools are going to try and pick off the best players from, like our level at the mid-major and low major to bring them in. And I think it will really be uncommon for kids to stay all 4 years. But I think, it's the mentality of kids have changed to, you see it on the AAU circuit, all these kids, and their parents, if they're not playing as much as they should, or they'll move to a different team and then move to a different team, and they won't fight through adversity or work harder, compete better, get better, develop to outplay the person who's getting that court time. And that, because of that mentality, it's in the college game now. Obviously there are some kids that move because, they're just maybe not at the Division One level. Division Two is the better level where they can have more success. But there's a lot of kids in that first year or second year won't fight for their place. They just, take the easy, quick fix. I'm going to go here and hopefully it's better there. And then it's not better there. And they jump around. And before you know it, their college career is over and they haven't had the success or the experience that they were hoping for.
Do you think it's a struggle because a lot of kids think, every kid wants to be a superstar rather than kids really embracing the role and being like, do you know what, I'm only going to play 8 minutes a game, but I'm going to be the best I can be in 8 minutes a game. Basketball's just going to be a thing I do for 4 years rather than I'm going to be a future NBA MVP or whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. All kids, they all come even in our program, the kids recruit, when I recruit them, well, what's your goal? Is it to play 4 years of college and then get your degree and work, or is it to be a pro, whatever? And every kid, I want to be a pro, but you've got to have that work ethic. Being a pro starts at that age. It's not, I'm going into my senior year, I'm going to act and work like a pro. You have that mentality from day one. And, again, some of these kids aren't honest with themselves when they look in the mirror, or aren't realistic at their level, how good they are. Be the best role player that you can be. Play 12 minutes a game, come off the bench and be the best player in that role to help the team win, and being content with that. But it's, again, how the game has gone, transformed, and especially over here, it's a lot of one-on-one play, individual play. And again, I go back to the AAU circuit. That's how the game is played. It's the one-on-one ISO basketball, and it's all about scoring and getting buckets, And again, it's that mentality coming into college, and some kids adapt and the light bulb goes off, and be that role player, play your part for the good of the team and make that sacrifice. But some kids don't, and they don't have success and end up transferring, and it's unfortunate.
Have you seen over the years, at Montana State, in your experience of recruiting British players, do you feel like there's been a difference in the talent level, the skill level over the years, or do you think that it's kind of stayed roughly about the same?
I think generally it's got better. There is a lot of talent. And it kind of it seems like it comes in waves. You have a couple of years where there's a lot of talent. The talent pool's pretty deep. And maybe then have a year or two where it's not so much and it comes back. But I think, overall across the board, players are, they're getting better, better coaching. Obviously with the EABL, the academy setup, I think has definitely helped. Obviously Masco, Charnwood, Barking, academies like that have a fantastic setup, and you see the number of kids, at that talent level getting to Division 1 level or Division 2, and having success here in the States or going into Europe. But I think in my 10 years of coaching here in the States, it's getting better every year.
If you were to talk about common threads of weaknesses that you see in British players as a whole, as just a generalisation, are there any that stick out when you're comparing them to, whether it's their American counterparts or their sort of European counterparts?
I think the first one is the competitiveness of kids. Now, obviously, there are a ton of British players that really are, compete and love to compete, but you have that different edge here in the States. It's that American mentality, I think. In England, a lot is, be, the graceful loser, or if you don't win but it's, are you truly competitive? Do you get, that you don't like to lose? Are you, a lot accepting losing, or hopefully I'm explaining it the right way, but that mentality, that really dog mentality, chip on your shoulder, I'm going to compete, I'm not losing, that mentality down to the core. And I think that's a big thing. That's a big shock for a lot of English lads when they make that transition over to the States, of that mentality. Now, obviously, there are a lot of English lads that have it, the ones that come out. I remember Ryan Martin, unbelievable. I mean, he was a dog, unbelievable. Luke Nelson, Cavell, Big B Williams, and thankfully Jubrile and Amin with us are super competitive. But I think, as a generalization, that would be the big thing that sticks out to me when when I'm back in England and I go watch practices, watch kids play. That's the biggest thing that sticks out, is the true competitive nature of practice or a game, Do
you think, just sticking on the recruiting side of things, do you think that, I feel like now, back, more than a few years ago, it was almost seemed much more of a requirement for kids to go to high school in the States at some point to get that exposure before going to college, where now there's way more kids that are able to stay at EABL schools, whether it's for 2 years or 3 years, and then go directly to the US from the UK. Do you think that's, a symptom of the UK game sort of getting better, or an increased level of education around maybe that high school basketball isn't the be-all and end-all? There's some, obviously, levels of high school basketball which really aren't what I think the perception generally is.
Right.
Yeah, kind of where do you sit on that sort of debate? Do you think that, kids are in a good situation now with EABL academies to be able to just stay in the UK until they're ready to fully go to college?
Yeah, I think, kind of both pathways are good. It depends on the kid and what he's looking for. Obviously with today, with social media, there's nowhere really to hide. College coaches can see all the videos of the English kids, generate interest, make calls. I know, the UK does get heavily recruited by, a lot of Division 1 or colleges, US colleges in general. But, in terms of the prep school route, yeah, it can be great, and I completely understand it, of a kid doing a year over here. Coming to the US, playing a year of prep school, playing at a higher level, getting Americanized, and then obviously increasing his exposure, to basically, all college coaches here in the US, whereas obviously the pool of colleges is that much smaller that do recruit the UK year in, year out. So you can definitely use it to your advantage. With the prep school, there are prep schools that have great programs, great setups, really do a great job with their kids. But there are a ton of prep schools that aren't organized. It's more a money-making machine, kind of scam machine. And the kids ultimately suffer. They don't have the experience that they were promised. I'm not going to say his name, but there's an English kid last year ended up at 2 prep schools. One closed, and then obviously went to a different one, and with the COVID had to come home. But his experience wasn't great with the prep school, that prep school route. So you have to be, do your homework, do your due diligence. You have to educate yourself and make sure if you do go that prep school path, that you're in the right situation for you. Because there's been, I know horror stories, of so many English kids that have got bad advice, been put in a situation like that, prep school or college situation, high school, where, they just can't have success. They're not going to have success there. And ultimately they suffer and end up back in the UK, worse for wear, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, and there is now, I think there is a growing body of players that have proven that you don't need to go to the States first before you go to college. It's like you can stay in the UK, you can be developed here just as well before making that jump. So, yeah, jumping back to your college career. So senior year, you got injured, a knee injury. Kind of, what happened with that? And then tying that into sort of turning pro. How do you think it impacted your rookie year, like the offers that were on the table? Do you think it impacted it at all? Right. Kind of what are your memories around it all?
Yeah, so, I basically pretty much started all of my sophomore and junior years at Wyoming. And then my senior year, it was kind of right at the start of practice, just had a knee injury. And never really got healthy during my senior year. Had my knee scoped at the start of the year. Just, it wasn't quite right. Missed some games, played some, missed some, didn't play as much, which was obviously for a senior year very frustrating because you want to go out on a high. Got healthy after the season, had another kind of scope on my knee, got healthy, everything was fine. But I think, I did obviously have a negative effect on turning pro, offers, contract offers. I'd like to have, I do genuinely believe if I was healthy, I would have maybe had a, higher level teams or been able to go to a higher league, higher level straight out of college. I ended up playing at the Birmingham Bullets, but it was really Birmingham. And then there was a team in Austria that, put a pretty good, offer on the table to me, but I ended up signing with the Birmingham Bullets that first year.
What made you, like now we're in a situation where I do feel like a lot of players, if they've got an option between somewhere on the continent or somewhere in the BBL, they will always choose Europe, regardless of lots of other factors, just because of just that sort of weird perception, which I do think is changing, but slowly. But it's kind of there. What made you decide to sign in Birmingham as opposed to Austria?
Well, there's a couple of things. Back then, the league was great. It was the Budweiser League. It was sponsored. I mean, there were great teams, majority of the teams were playing in the arenas with good crowds. I mean, the level of play, if you look back at the players at that time, it was a great league. And it's funny because that summer when I first played with the England national team in the summer after, I got done at Wyoming, Nick Nurse was the assistant coach. And obviously he just got done coaching at the Bullets and knew that they were talking to me and kind of did a great sales job on the structure of the team, the fans, the players, Tony Dorsey, Nigel Lloyd, and the whole setup, and, could be a good platform to, play in the BBL for a year, possibly 2, to then move on into, mainland Europe and play at a higher level.
That sort of era of the BBL, late 90s through to the early 2000s, kind of what many consider the heyday, where you had the, right, the rich owners and a lot of money flowing in and out of the sport. But, a lot of people maintain that, during that time, it was very shaky foundations. A lot of teams were just losing money. Do you have memories of that? Were you aware of that at all? Like in terms of just, I guess, the Birmingham situation, was it a lot of tickets that were being given away as freebies? It weren't actually paying customers coming to the games? Like, what was your recollection as a player?
Yeah, I mean, Harry Robleski was the owner, and he did a great job. He was a great salesman. Really promoted the team. We had a really good fan base. With the Bullets. We played at the NEC and the NIA. Good arenas. We had good crowds. I think we averaged about 4,000. Now, obviously, looking back, I know a lot of tickets were given away, but there was never any issue. How the players were treated, our setup in terms of housing, cars, getting paid on time, everything was great. There was never an issue. Looking back, it was, Harry really did a good job running the team. Now, obviously, I don't know the bottom line, if he was losing money, things of that sort, but, my experience, how I was treated, how the players were treated was great.
The Bosman ruling had come into effect, about a year, maybe the year before?
It was the summer. No, it was right when I came. I think it was right when I came out.
Right.
I got lucky at that time that the Bosman ruling came out in that spring, I think, and then I signed in the summer. So, those first few years when that ruling had passed, my value having the English passport really rose, because that second year I went from the BBL right into, the top league in Greece, and having that passport really helped in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to just ask kind of how you think that affected sort of, how do you sort of seeing it from, I guess, being in the league that season? I've been kind of speaking to various different people about it, and there was a whole thing where the owners essentially thought that all of the top British talent was going to leave for Europe, so they were scared of it. Well, that's what they said, and then as a result of that, they increased the number of Americans. So the league, that was kind of what began the league being dominated by Americans, and all of a sudden there was a lot less spots for British players. I guess from your vantage point, how did you see it affecting British basketball, your fellow colleagues, players, teammates, and the league as a whole?
Well, yeah, obviously, with that rule change with the Bosman ruling, like I just said, our value, the top British players to go into Europe, obviously not be classed as a foreign player, our value increased. And, the money that was on the table then, especially, like I said, that first, 3 or 4, 5 years for Bosman players, in my case, and obviously talking with other British players at the time, it was too big a difference to, stay in the BBL, unfortunately. It would have been great. I'd have loved to have been able to play at home and for my whole career. Absolutely, but the financial side of things, the difference was too great, and it was, too much to turn down.
Can you give us any type of ballpark figures about what you could earn in Europe compared to what you could earn in the BBL?
Mine, I ended up, practically doubled for sure what I made in the BBL. Absolutely. Actually, it was more than that. I'm trying to think about it. It was probably, 4 times. I ended up making 4 times more my year in Greece than I did in the BBL.
Wow.
So again, it's just too much. Now, I wasn't making that much compared to, some of the players, but again, you look at the top British players, like, obviously I'm kind of in the same areas like Andy Betts, who was one of my favorite British players of all time. Unbelievable player, unbelievable teammate. Obviously he was playing at that high level in Europe, in the EuroLeague. It's not even in the same ballpark, so. Yeah.
The other thing, just in terms of just culturally with basketball, kind of in that era, I remember you saying that one of the memories that sticks out for you playing for the national team was your home debut versus Israel at the MEN in Manchester, and there was like 7,000 fans there. What do you think changed? Like, what was different back then that allowed the national team to get crowds of that number compared to today, where even in the run-up to 2012 Olympics, where you had Luau and Pops, I remember in Sheffield they struggled to even sell 1,000 tickets. It was crazy.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I said, at the time, the BBL or the Budweiser League at that time, there was multiple games on Sky every week, and we had a great slot in terms of on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, that, basketball game would come on immediately after the Premiership football game. So maybe, people watching it on Sky. They even had the kind of half-hour like highlight show on Sky as well. But having that, media coverage, I'd like to think definitely helped. But the standard of play, like I said, the league was strong. Everyone was in the arenas, so I had a kind of more professional feel rather than being in, gyms, sports halls. I think the standard of play was really good. So I think those factors, contributed to, better exposure, better crowds for the national team.
Your years with the England national team, so it was what, 97 through to 2004-ish, which I think was it under Laszlo Nemeth that entire period?
Yeah, the entire period. Because it was 97 when I came out, and then obviously it had that year where financially, it disappeared, the national team, for a year or two, and then obviously came back with GB, with Chris Finch, and obviously the push for the Olympics.
What were your standout memories of your time with the England program during those years?
I mean, obviously the setup wasn't great, with the national team. Obviously the lack of funds wasn't so professional. We were always, basically we'd have a week together and then go try and play, and the qualify for the European Championships, play games. You have a week, maybe 2 weeks to practice, to come together and try and play. And just the organization, I get it, the lack of funds just didn't adhere to having a proper training camp and being around each other for weeks on end. But, Laszlo was great. He was a great coach, really, really cared about the team, the players. As I mentioned to you previously, I know he kind of paid for things out of his own pocket to make sure that we had, we're treated the right way, whether it was meals, whether it was gear, shoes, whatever. Absolutely. He did everything he could for us, and he was such a great coach to play for. But, we had a lot of talent. We really had a lot of talent at that time too. And again, frustrating that we didn't get better results. We had flashes, but I still go back through the lack of preparation that we were able to have really affected us. But, you're talking, obviously, Steve Bucknell, Roger Huggins, obviously John Amici, Andy Betts. Really, really good players. And, we had some good moments, but didn't achieve the results, obviously, that we wanted to. But it's really my fond memories was the travel, the camaraderie, the locker room, being around. They were great guys. And being in those situations, where, again, how we traveled, and we're on a minivan in the middle of traveling from like Austria to, I don't even know, Slovenia or Slovakia, where we're going. And there's 15 of us on a minibus through Laszlo's, one of his friends in Europe. Great memories, So that's what I take away from it.
Are there any standout games, victories that come to mind when you think about your time with England?
I remember, one big win, we were in Latvia on the road, hostile crowd, and it was a big, important game in the qualifying. And we ended up beating them, in Latvia. And Andy Betts was unbelievable that night. I think he had like 30 points, unbelievable. But that was a big win, important win for us. I remember, hostile crowd at the end of the game, they kind of threw some beer bottles that smashed on the floor. We had to run out through the tunnel. But, big game there. Trying to think others that stand out. Again, it's quite a while ago. But it would just be kind of some individual wins. Obviously we never qualified for a European Championship or anything of that sort.
And then you were involved with the GB program in the first 2 years when it was kind of restarted up after winning the London 2012 Olympic bid. I guess, what are your memories of that first training camp in 2006? How did you feel the program differed? Obviously, it had considerably more money than the England program did. How did you feel it differed, and kind of, what are your memories of those sort of early formative years of the reincarnation of the program?
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, it would have been a year or two with no national team stuff, and I was back in the States in the summer. I was actually back in Wyoming for the summer when I got the call from Chris Finch and was like, "Hey, GB programs being put together. Would you be interested? Would you come to training camp? And absolutely yes, no doubt. And having that conversation with him, obviously the financial backing was night and day compared to how it was. And his vision for getting the program, the national team, the GB team back on its feet, his vision, how he wanted it organized, what he wanted to do. Again, that's how it should have been from day one, always like that. Going to that first camp, Luol wasn't there. He came the next year. But again, just the professionalism, the organization where we stayed, how we practiced, the preparation. We had weeks of preparation instead of, a week. The coaching staff that was put together. I mean, just everything. It's how it should have been in the first place. So it was a breath of fresh air and very exciting to be a part of.
That first year, who were some of the other players in the squad? I feel like from memory, it was Drew Sullivan and Nate Rankin from that first year that ended up making the London 2012 Olympics, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's those two. Roger Huggins was still there. I think Steve Hansel was still around. Delmy obviously as well.
Yeah.
It was kind of still that us at that time, the kind of older generation, whereas the new, Robert Archibald, Luol, those younger guys, Eric Boateng, Joel Freeland, those guys, it hadn't quite emerged yet.
Yeah.
Mike Bernard was around as well then. So those were the guys that first year.
When Luol came in the next year, what was your knowledge of him before he came in, and then when he came to training camp practice, like seeing him up close? Obviously, at that point, so what was it, 2007? So he'd been in the league a couple years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so like what were your memories of him? How clear was it what a talent he was?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't know him. Obviously knew about him, obviously. And then, there was a talk he was going to come that first year, and I think it was insurance or something. Couldn't quite get the right level of insurance or the cost, whatever. It didn't work out, unfortunately. But then he came that second year. We actually had training camp at the IMG Academy in Florida, is where we had training camp. We were there 2 weeks. Yeah, 2-3 weeks or whatever. I mean, again, great setup. The IMG Academy campus is unreal down there in Sarasota. But came and you don't really, I don't know him. You think, oh, this is this big NBA star, but the most humble person, of that level, of that stature I've been around. Down to earth, just a normal guy. Very humble, very kind, went out of his way, with teammates, and just obviously super talented player. You saw it from the first training session. Here's this 6'8" long wing. But the thing is, that impressed me obviously was his competitiveness, how hard he practiced, how hard he worked. But it wasn't flash. It was efficient. It was fundamental, and he kept the game simple. And with his, God-given athletic ability, his physical tools, I mean, he was an unbelievable player, but a great teammate to be around. He wasn't selfish, wasn't flashy. It wasn't me. It was all about the team. But his drive, his work ethic, and his competitiveness in practice, he set the tone for everything. It filtered down. And obviously, Andy Betts, Robert Archibald, who had played in the NBA. I mean, obviously they were leaders as well, but Luol was, different animal altogether.
Was there part of you that, obviously at that point, everyone had an eye on London 2012. Were you kind of thinking, well, you're coming to the end of your career, it's a long shot. How difficult was that for you to kind of deal with in your head?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long shot. And, obviously, deep down, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I knew, but obviously it was still that little glimmer of hope, or maybe I can be 12th or 13th man and just get there, But, at that point, I wasn't good enough. I was down, the end of my career, I was early 30s then. I just, with the standard of players that were, again, coming in, the younger generation, I wasn't good enough, unfortunately, at that point. But it would have been nice if it was a couple of years earlier. Maybe I'd have squeezed in and been able to have that experience, but unfortunately didn't make it.
Tough. So after you did your year in Birmingham, you obviously then went and signed in Greece. Everyone that plays in Greece has got some crazy stories. Are there any for you that stick out of your time there?
Gosh. So I remember playing Panathinaikos in Panathinaikos, and big crowd. They play in the Olympic facility there. And I was on the court, and, they had Dino, Roger, Bodiroga. I mean, obviously they were stacked like they are every year. And there was two, Dino, Roger, I'd obviously just come back from playing with the Boston Celtics, and obviously had a really good NBA career. And we actually had, we had an American big guy who played at Arkansas, who kind of got drafted really big. But Dino Roger kind of gave him 30 without actually me and this kid 30 without breaking a sweat. I mean, it was men against boys. And I remember just watching like, wow, he was unreal. He made everything look so easy. And then Bodiroga, who's one of my favorite European players of all time. I mean, he was so smooth, so good. But I remember he was coming across the lane one time. I thought, okay, so I give him one right across the chops, and obviously picked up a foul. But the whole crowd, the Greek crowd just went wild and started throwing like coins at me from the baseline. I was like, okay, I won't do that again. But the crowd, the crowds were great. I remember playing Olympiakos at home. Our gym, I was playing for Apollon Patra at the time, was, probably about 4,000 people. It was a smaller gym. But Olympiakos, obviously it's packed. And we lost in double overtime. And there was a critical call in the second overtime where it should have been a jump ball, but the referee called a foul for Olympiakos player. And the whole crowd, tried to kind of rush the floor. They had the police in there holding them back. And again, throwing coins, batteries, phones at the referee. It's just, those stories that everyone says about playing in Greece. Very passionate, but very wild, but fun to be in those environments.
Obviously, over the course of the rest of your career, you did stints in Belgium, in Italy, the Czech Republic. Like, what are the standout, I guess, memories from the remainder of your European career? I'm aware of time here, so I'm kind of trying to wrap it up in a sort of overviewing way rather than going into each year in detail.
Yeah, very lucky. To play at that level, in those countries, in those leagues. Obviously playing 3 years in Italy and Serie A was great. Again, just the standard of basketball, the level, but even just the lifestyle living in Italy. There's worse places to be. I was very lucky, but the basketball was unbelievable. And at that level, I was more of a role player. I was a backup big. Started some games. I was just a solid pro at that level. But again, playing good, Scavallini and Bologna and, the big teams. Playing against at that level, those players, unbelievable experience. Belgium, my 3 years in Belgium, I played well, really well in Belgium. And again, really enjoyed living there. Belgium was a great league. Again, great setup. Money was good. And that level, I actually, I played a lot. In those 3 years, I played really well. The Bundesliga in Germany, I played well in that league. But again, just great experiences, different countries, coaches, style of basketball, playing against, really good players. Just unbelievable experiences. Very lucky to have played at that level.
The other surprise team that I saw on your CV, which I wasn't aware of, was London United.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Because obviously at that point you'd been playing in Europe. You just the last season before you'd been in Italy, and I think that season, did you even complete the season there? You ended up in Czech Republic for the second half of the season.
Yeah, so I was there for 3 months. So I'd got done in Italy, and it's just a summer where I didn't get the contract that I wanted in Europe. Had some offers, wasn't what I wanted or where I wanted to play. And I'm older at that point. I'm married. My first daughter was born, so I obviously been a bit more picky. So decided, okay, I'll play for London United. Had the kind of get out clause that if a team from mainland Europe came, I could go. So That's Tony Garbaletto was the coach. Junior Williams was our point guard. I mean, we had a nice little team, really did. That was the first year of London United. Jack Majeski was the owner, general manager, put it together. And it was good. It was good. It was really good. I wish I could have stayed, but then I got the offer from the Czech Republic. Again, it was too big a difference to turn down. So I went to the Czech Republic.
When you compare the BBL in that 2000, so that was 2006, 2007 season, compared to your Birmingham Bullets years, 97, 98, over the course of those 10 years, obviously it changed quite a lot. What was it like to have seen it, in its heyday, as people say, compared to that era? Yeah, I mean, there was still a lot of, talented players in the league. There really was a lot of talent, but it was more the structure, the setup, playing again in sports halls rather than arenas. Just the organizational side of things. And obviously, in those years, there was no games on Sky, BBC, whatever. So it was, I get it was hard, financially for teams to, increase the wages, have the right facilities, the structure, the setup. But it was unfortunate to see, that first year where I played, where it's the Budweiser League, that's what it should be, can be, could be, and it kind of dropped off. I mean, again, still a lot of talent in the league, but just the organizational side of things had really decreased. And then after that stint in Czech Republic, you ended up sort of doing the final 3 years of your career with the Everton Tigers, which was a whole situation in itself. A lot of people have got various different stories about what happened there. Can you sort of give us your take on the situation? Was that the first year of the franchise?
Yes.
Yeah.
So exactly. First year of the franchise, I got done in the Czech Republic. And again, that was my last year with the national team. So I got done, and my youngest daughter was being born right at that time. I remember I was actually at the airport in Edinburgh. We played Holland in Edinburgh, and the team was getting ready to fly to Belarus. And I'm about to get on the plane. My wife calls, "Your water's broken. You got to come." So I had to leave, literally go get on a plane for the birth of my second child. Anyway, so we got done with that national team stuff, games, and then Everton called me, and obviously I'm from Southport. It's 20 minutes away from Liverpool. New franchise connected with the football club. Would I be interested? And I was kind of, again, I'm 34 at this point. I know I've got a couple more years in me, and I'm thinking, okay, I can live in my hometown in Southport, drive to Liverpool. My family's in Southport. It wouldn't be the worst thing. So I ended up kind of signing with them like I did with London United. Okay, I'll come. I didn't have the contract offers from Europe that I was looking for. And I'm kind of starting to wind down my career, so I was like, all right, I'll play for Everton. Henry Mooney was the coach, funny, Delmy Herriman was on the team. So we talked about it. So I did that. And at Christmas, it was just before Christmas, actually. I think it was November of that first season. The general manager and Henry put a 2-year extension on the table, and actually it was pretty good money. It really was at the time. And I'm thinking, okay, for that money, 2 years take me to 36. I can live at home. I've kind of come full circle, with my wife, with my kids. Yep, I'll do it. So I signed and finished my career there.
Did you end up getting every paycheck that was in your contract?
So that last year, the wheels started to kind of fall off financially a little bit. And so I didn't. So my last year, I'm still owed some money, which obviously I'll never get. And it was probably 2 paychecks, I think, the last 2 months. Okay. Yeah. So thankfully I was done. I knew my last year was my last year. I could have maybe eked out another year or two, but I wasn't playing that well. My knees had gone, I was old. So thankfully I got out at the right time. And
you finished as a playoff champion, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, full circle, finished up. My last game was in Birmingham, at the NIA. won the playoffs. Again, we had a really good team. Olu Babalolo is one of my favorite British players, unbelievable talent. He was our captain. But it was nice to go out a winner, win your final game.
And then the other thing that sort of happened whilst you were at Everton was you started coaching, right, with the academy side, and that was I think was your first foray into sort of getting into the coaching side. You kind of knew you wanted to be a coach.
Yeah, exactly. I knew obviously the last few years, about halfway through my career, I knew I wanted to coach, whether it was in the States or Britain or in England or in Europe. I wanted to be a coach. And so that last kind of Tony Garbaletto kind of, I wouldn't say I was player coach, but, we talked and he let me do some video scout stuff, things like that. And he really helped me in those years start that mental process of thinking like a coach, talking about things on the coaching side, which really helped me. And then Everton started the academy team. So they asked me to do that. I wanted to do that to get into coaching, to start getting that coaching experience. And it was great. Some talented kids started that off. But then ultimately, like I said, I met my wife at Wyoming at school, and I dragged her around Europe for 12 years or whatever. And it was like, all right, we'll go back to the States. And I started the process of trying to get into college coaching, getting my foot in the door somewhere. That last year I was playing at Everton because, like I said, I knew it was going to be my last year. So started that process, and lucky enough, I got in at the junior college level at Lamar Community College in Colorado.
So you did 3 years at Lamar before the Montana State position came up, right?
Yep, that's right.
How was the differences between the coaching at JUCO level compared to now Division I level?
It's totally different. The JUCO level, you like literally, especially as an assistant, you got to do everything. Like I was driving the bus on the road games, the school bus on the road games. I have to do the laundry for the players, after practice every day, still recruit, class checks, grade checks. You do it all. But it was a great learning experience to have your hands on everything and get that experience at the JUCO level, and as a player, you've got to be hungry to be at junior college, and the same thing as a coach. It's a great learning experience. At the level, we had two English kids there, Shorey Adenican and Matt Sheriff, who both, Shorey went to play at Seattle and Matt played at an NAIA school in Illinois and Chicago. But great memories, and really prepared me for life at the Division I level. And here at the Division I level, it's serious business. Obviously, it is business. The pressure to win is huge. Obviously, if you don't win, you don't have a job. It's that simple. A lot of pressure to recruit, to bring in talented players. But it is night and day, the difference between D1 and JUCO.
One of the things you said previously is that one day you would love to coach the Great Britain senior men's national team. Has there been any conversations about getting you involved with the Great Britain sort of setup at all? Is this still something that you aspire to and you're thinking about and you'd like to be involved with?
Absolutely. I'd absolutely love to be involved with the Great Britain program in any way, whether it's the men's team, under 18, 16s, under 20, whatever. Just to be a part of that, would be very proud to, representing our country and be involved in that setup. Haven't really had conversations, really. Haven't been, I have talked to Steve. I actually talked to Steve Bucknell. It was last year about, hey, I'd love to be involved in the summer, whether it's volunteer, I'll just come over, whatever. If I, be involved in some way would be great. And apparently I missed the deadline to apply or something, but in the future, I'd love to be involved. If that's something that's possible, would be an honor, would be great. And yes, it still would be a goal of mine to one day be the Great Britain senior men's, head coach if possible.
Awesome. Right. Some quick fire questions just to wrap up. Starting with the best British junior player you've ever seen.
Ryan Richards.
Good shout. I'd agree with you on that one.
Yeah, unbelievable. He was 17. I first played against him in Belgium when he was with Chris Finch at Mons. Was the first time I saw him in pre-season. Played against each other, and I'm like, I mean, holy, unbelievable talent, unbelievable at that age.
The toughest player you've ever had to guard?
Tim Duncan.
When did you play? When did you play him?
So I played in the World Student Games in Japan.
Okay.
And USA was in our group, and it was Tim Duncan, Iverson, Ray Allen, Kerry Kittles, Thela Harrington. I mean, it was legit, and Tim Duncan would be the hardest player.
What was the final score of that game?
So it was reasonably close at halftime, and then Iverson and Kerry Kittles and Ray Allen had a field day. The second steals, they just turned it up, and I think we got beat by like 35.
Wow.
And it was one of their closest games in the whole tournament. But actually, that's my big thing. In the box score, I actually scored more than Tim Duncan. So there you go. I have it framed at home. But Tim Duncan, I tell you, in college was the hardest person, Danny Fortson at Cincinnati. You know, he's an undersized big. He played in the NBA for many years. He was 6'8", 260, and he was that undersized, shorter, wide body, and he gave me fits in college. He was tough. As a pro, Dino Roger, absolutely, Dino Roger.
Your favorite coach or best coach that you played for?
Best coach I played for. It was coach in Italy, Matteo Bonaccioli, who now just became the head coach at Udine. He coached at Bologna. I mean, he might have even coached the national team for a period, but I actually played for him in Messina, in my first year in Italy, and my last year in Italy at Teramo. He coached me twice. Just a really good coach, tactician, X's and O's, how he viewed the game, how he played. Really enjoyed playing for him. But I have a big soft spot for Tony Garbaletto. I really do. We've always got on. I mean, he was assistant coach on the England team when I first started playing as well after Nick Nurse. So I've known him for a long time. And then obviously getting coached by him at Everton, and I have a lot of respect. I think he's a great coach. And again, really helped me a lot on my pathway to becoming a coach. So really, really have a big respect for Tony.
Do you have a toughest sort of basketball memory, difficult basketball moment?
Difficult basketball moment. It would be I remember playing with the national team with Laszlo for England. We were playing a kind of scrimmage closed door game against Croatia at the NEC, and I was playing well, and I ended up, there was a pop in my calf, and I tore my calf muscle. It felt like I'd been hit with a golf ball. So then, and I had to go back to my club team, and obviously I'm injured, and it was late on. It was in February or something like that, and my contract was running, was up in May at the end of the season, and I didn't play for the rest of the season. I tried to come back, and I came back too soon. So I was thinking I'm going to be screwed. I'm injured, hadn't played, contract year. All right, am I going to, be able to get on another team, make the same money? All those things come into play. But thankfully, the team re-signed me for another year. But there was that couple of months window when, I was going to be out for quite a while, and, uncertain about my next team or what I was going to do.
And then your favorite basketball memory?
Favorite basketball memory. Gosh, that's tough. I mean, I still go back to that first game with the national team, standing there against Israel with the national anthem playing. I mean, that was a great moment. I will say one of my favorite moments when I was playing in Italy, my first year, and we played Fortitudo Bologna, who ended up going to the Final Four of the EuroLeague that year. I mean, great team. I mean, that stadium is it's a perfect basketball arena, 7,000, but you come up from under the floor. So you're in the basement and you come up under the floor, and you hear like the crowd, the fans, the set. I mean, it was like goosebumps. I mean, it was an unbelievable atmosphere. I mean, I still, playing in that environment. My first obviously college game, my first college game at Wyoming was at Cincinnati in front of 13,000 people. I'm like deer in the headlights. I still remember my first shot. I took a turnaround in the post and like clanked it off. I don't even know if I hit the rim. I was so nervous, almost broke the backboard. But just playing in that environment, I remember Oscar Robertson was sat courtside. So those kind of memories always stick out.
And then what do you want your sort of legacy to be when people talk about, Chris Haslam, the player? How do you want to be remembered?
As a player, like I said, just that I was, that honest blue collar player. I mean, like I said, I think, I was a physical player, always gave my best. I was to be, thought of as a good player, but, a great teammate, and always played for the team, I think that's what I'd like to be, as a player remembered for.
Perfect. That's a perfect place to wrap it up. Chris, thanks so much for sticking with it. We obviously had a few technical issues at the beginning. I really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, Sam. Really appreciate it.